Hello and welcome to the Owl Hoot podcast with me, Caroline Norbury. In each episode, I chat to amazing guests with way more expertise than me on topics covering the environment and sustainability. You'll get to hear the facts on climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, as well as discover the fabulous actions that individuals and organisations are doing to mitigate and adapt to our changing world. I don't know about you, but I find it reassuring and hopeful that there are so many capable people out there doing great things for our planet, as well as inspiring me to get on and do my bit too. So without further ado, let's get on with this week's episode. It is my absolute delight to have Jen Gale on the podcast. Jen is not only a fellow podcaster with the hugely successful Sustainablish podcast, but is a blogger, writer and speaker on how to live sustainably imperfectly. Once a vet, she took on the challenge of buying nothing new for a year and began blogging about her experiences. She found her new place in the world and went on to found Sustainablish and set up the Knackered Mums Eco Club, a space for those who are eco-curious and want to do their bit in making sure we don't mess up our planet for our future generations. Jen has also written 2 highly accessible books to help you on your way, titled The Sustainablish Living Guide and The Sustainablish Guide to Green Parenting. Welcome, Jen, to the podcast.
Thank you. What an intro. That was awesome. I might have to steal that.
You're welcome. Take it. That's fine. So I'm going to start by asking you a little bit of a backstory, find out how a vet became to be a sustainable living guru. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so start of it all really was that year buying nothing new. So that was 2012-13. And I kind of, I thought we were pretty green, like we did our recycling. That was kind of, I thought that was peak green. I thought, well, what else can we do? Surely we can't make a difference. And then read an article in a magazine. A lady was doing something called a secondhand safari, which was a year buying nothing new. And I thought, that sounds quite fun. What a fun challenge. I just discovered like Free Cycle and places like that. So I thought, that sounds quite interesting. We should give it a go. And it was quite naive. Well, not quite naive, very naive. It was just this, that sounds like it'd be quite fun. And I think I was like a lot of people, I hadn't joined the dots at all between sort of consumption and climate, and it's kind of vaguely knew that fast fashion existed but didn't really know what it was or quite really what went on. It was very much a kind of, I don't think consciously but subconsciously sort of looking away from a lot of these issues, thinking they're not really mine to deal with. Someone else will come along and fix those, and surely the government need to be acting, and it can't really be that bad because otherwise we wouldn't be allowed to do it, and all those kinds of things. And then just opened this whole can of worms and was like, oh, it is that bad, and oh god. And then you can't, once you've learned that stuff, you can't sort of unlearn it, which is sometimes I wish maybe I could. You can't kind of unlearn it and just kind of go back to how things were.
Yeah, absolutely. When you did that Make Do and Mend You, were you ready for the fact that actually that was going to be pivotal, in that you were going to sort of end a chapter of your life with being a vet and then completely embrace sustainable living?
No, I don't think I had this was, like I said, it was sort of 2012. And I think, blogs were becoming a thing. And, so there's always that, the dream, isn't there? I'm going to start a blog and it's going to be the thing. But I just sort of thought, I don't really know what to expect, but I'm going to say yes to everything, or to as many things as possible that kind of come up during the year. So yeah. And it was, it did get some traction, and it got, I think I look back now and I think, God, how was I so brave? I just tweeted like BBC Wiltshire, our local radio, BBC radio station, went, oh, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to speak to me about it? And they were like, yeah, okay. So I went in there and spoke to them, and then went back in to sort of update them during the year. And then somebody heard me on that, and she was a journalist, and and she wrote a piece for The Sun, and it kind of, it was exciting. I had no expectation. Well, it was, you do have this kind of like, oh, wouldn't that be amazing? But it was a real roller coaster. Yeah.
And how was it actually? Because obviously you have this idea of what it will be like not to buy anything new, but what was it really like? Was most of it fine and just some
Yeah.
of it difficult?
I thought it would be really like, we weren't, some people grow up with that thrift shop mentality, or that, you know, that's how they shop, and I sort of was, you know, my parents were kind of full on baby boomers, you know, so it just wasn't something, like my dad said to me, like, why do you go into charity shops? Like, he just didn't get it. And so it was a real different way of shopping, I guess, for us. Like, previously we just not really thought, this sounds really awful, but we'd not really thought about what we were buying, other than where can we get it cheapest, might there be a sale on, all that kind of thing. So yeah, it was, and I thought it was going to be really difficult, but actually probably the buying nothing new bit was the easiest bit. And it was I randomly, ridiculously decided I was going to blog every day for the year, and that was the hardest bit, in all honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you make I think that whole, you've touched upon it twice now, about you kind of think you're doing the right thing and somebody else is going to deal with the really big stuff, and then you, as you say, you open a can of worms, and then you realize it's everything, isn't it? It becomes everything. I know you mentioned in both your books about realizing how complex everything is. It's not, you know, when you do go to buy something, it's not as easy going, oh, I just need to make that choice and that'll be sustainable. What does sustainable living mean to you now that you've come this far?
I think for me, it's about trying to make better decisions more of the time, trying to make informed decisions. And that's, I'm aware that sounds really worthy and I'm not in any way, shape or form perfect. I think there's something around kind of actually recognizing the power that we have as individuals and as families and things to create change, and doing what we can when we can to sort of move that forwards. There's a brilliant quote, I think it's in both books, by Anna Lappe, that says, every time we spend money, we cast a vote for the kind of world we want. And that was a real, like, proper light bulb, like, whoa moment for me, that realization that, you know, we get to choose who we give our money to. We get to choose whether we repair something or upgrade something, or, you know, like, I think a lot of our choices, a lot of the time, are very unconscious. They're very unthought out, and that's not a malicious thing. That's just, we're busy, we're time poor, we don't have the headspace or the energy, and sometimes not the budget, and so we make a lot of choices out of these habits that we've sort of fallen into. And actually, if we give ourselves the time to stop and to think, actually, what is important to me? What are my values? Are these choices that I'm making aligning with them? And I'm not saying, like I said, that all my choices align with my values. There's an awful lot of compromise that goes on, but recognizing that some things can quite easily be more in line with your values. And because I kind of like to think that I don't know, maybe I'm naive, you know, 99.9% of the population would say, yes, I want a better world. Yes, I want a fairer world. Yes, I want a cleaner world. But actually, a lot of the time, the things that we're doing day to day aren't in line with that. And that's because we live in a consumer society, a disposable society, a society that convenience and money is king. And so it's sometimes very difficult to make different decisions. That wasn't a very succinct answer, was it?
No, absolutely. No, I'm getting them. You know, the message is that we all do this. We all get on with this stuff. We're within a structure, aren't we, of society, and we're getting on with it, thinking it's all okay, until somebody goes, well, actually, that purchasing choice or doing that is not that helpful. Somebody I spoke to on the podcast a couple of weeks ago mentioned about getting curious, and I think it's a starting point for lots of avenues within the environment. Is the minute you start to go, oh well, actually, you know, this top that I might buy, what's it made of? Who made it? Where's it from? The minute you start questioning those things, that's when you enter the rabbit hole.
It is a massive rabbit hole, and it's so countercultural to question these things, isn't it? Because we are bombarded with, you know, depending on where you live and how you travel and things, like thousands of messages a day telling us that we will be more popular, more successful, prettier, look younger, all these messages if we buy X, Y, and Z. And so actually to take a step back and to start to question that is, you know, that's very ingrained in us. It's very difficult to do that.
Did you find through this process that you naturally bought less, or you just bought better, or maybe a mix of those two?
To start off with, I went a bit mad, and because I was like, oh, it's secondhand, it's fine. And so I, having not been somebody who really went into the charity shops, and being somebody who, I'd get really annoyed if you said to someone, oh, I really like your dress or your trousers. Oh, I got these in the charity shop, they were 50p. And I'd be like, oh, how do you find things? And I never can. And then I sort of, started properly looking, and did start finding things. And so I went from someone who, didn't have any dresses to having like 4 dresses, because, they're less than a fiver. And actually, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't really matter. And excuse me, all those kinds of things. But so I probably went a bit overboard to start with. And then that sort of slow dawning realization that actually, too much stuff is still too much stuff. And I think we randomly started the year in September. And then in the January, it was our local wildlife trust were doing a zero waste sort of push. They're doing this 8-week Slim Your Bin challenge. And again, that was a real kind of, I just hadn't made the connection between the stuff that we were bringing into our homes and the stuff that was leaving our homes, and the fact that pretty much everything we bring in, we got to deal with it at some point at the end of it. And so whether we, obviously buying it secondhand is a better option, but if it's still going to end up in landfill and we're not going to really use it, then it's not maybe a great choice to make.
Yeah, and that's another point that I picked up on through looking at you and listening to you, is that nice phrase that you use, there is no way.
Yeah.
The minute you start thinking about, oh, actually, what happens when I do put it in the bin or the recycling or the charity, what is actually happening?
Yeah.
Because it's nice to think, oh, well, somebody else is looking after it. It's all
Yes.
good.
And it's, we're so lucky here that we have a really great, well, we love to whinge about our recycling systems and our bins and things, don't we, here in the UK? But, we do have an infrastructure in place. We do have, well managed and maintained landfill sites and energy from waste things and all that sort of thing. But, there are communities around the globe where they have no, they're living on rubbish dumps. They're like chucking it all into the rivers. So, for us, we put it in the bin and it goes away and we don't have to think about it anymore, but it's still there, and we kind of forget that, don't we? And the same to a certain extent with the stuff we donate to charity shops. We kind of think, oh, well done me, I've done a great thing, I've decluttered my house and I've given it to the charity shop and they're going to make some money out of it. But if it's dirty or ripped or torn or it's missing bits, all we're doing is passing on the guilt and the expense actually to the charity shop of putting it in landfill. So we've almost, I think, sometimes used charity shops as this kind of guilt-free way of continuing to overconsume, and especially with things like fast fashion, because I can give it to the charity shop once I'm done with it. It doesn't matter if I only wear it once, because I can give it to the charity shop. But actually, the charity shops are getting inundated with this very cheap fast fashion, and often I think there's a stat that only 10 to 30% of clothes donated to charity shops in the UK are actually sold on within the UK. The rest is bagged up and sold on this sort of billion-dollar textile trade, international trade. But that's starting to have a real impact on the countries that it's being exported to. So it's oh my God, your head can kind of, I thought I was doing the right thing giving it to the charity shop. And like you said at the beginning, it's so complex, isn't it?
It is. And I wonder, because you've set up your Knackered Mums Eco Club, how is that worked in terms of bringing people together that are trying to do the right thing, but they are, it is complex, isn't it? Do people come to you because they want to know what the right thing is to do, but just because it's just so flipping complex?
Yeah, and it's overwhelming, isn't it? It's, you sort of think, you said, didn't you, it's everything. It's, once you start to look, to sort of peek through the curtains or whatever, I can understand why people just pull the curtains shut again and go, no, because it's the food you eat, it's how you travel, and there's a lot of fear of judgment, there's all these stereotypes that exist, and actually if I'm going to be air quotes sustainable, I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and that actually they're not my people, and I'm not that type of person, and all these kind of reasons why we might just merrily, or not so, slightly guiltily kind of look away again. But yeah, I really wanted the Knackered Mums Eco Club to be like a safe space to come and to start and to get it wrong and to be imperfect and to whinge about, the fact that maybe your husband's not on board or your kids are driving you mad, or, the fact that we're it's a very real lived experience and we're all making compromises everywhere and doing it imperfectly, and that's okay, and that we're still making a difference despite all of that. And I hope it's been going for a year now. I I think that's what's there.
Yeah, I think the ish and the imperfect allows people to get on board, doesn't it? Because we're all just doing our best, and there is no perfect way of living an eco life. Do you get, because you've been doing this for a while, do you get any backlash from perhaps more eco, if there is such a thing, people that, oh no, you're still not living, who do aspire to whatever perfectly green might be? Do you get any?
I mean, I've had the odd email, usually from men actually, saying, sustainable, and I think I had it on a webinar or something I did, somebody saying, like, it's not enough to reduce or to do a bit less, or to, we're at the point where we need massive action, and I absolutely agree with that. But also, we can't get people from A to Z in one jump. I use the analogy of, if I'm sat there in my pajamas eating a bar of chocolate, watching telly, and someone goes to me, you're going to run a marathon tomorrow, I'm going, no, I'm not. Like, absolutely not a chance. You're off your head, like, go away. If someone comes to me and they said, in 6 months' time, or, we're going to run a marathon, we're going to do it together, I'm going to sort out the training plan and everything for you, so you know exactly what you've got to do and when you've got to do it, and really, we're going to get some buddies along to do it with you, and it doesn't matter that you can't even find your trainers, because that's going to be the first thing. We're going to go and find a pair of trainers together. I'm much more likely to go, oh yeah, actually, maybe I can run a marathon in 6 months' time. So, we need massive action, but we also need everyone on board, and we can, there's that brilliant quote, isn't there? I'm sure you've seen it, from Anne-Marie Bonneau, who's a zero waste chef. And she talks about, we don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. And it's exactly the same for every aspect of sustainable living. If we can get millions of people doing maybe 5 things, that's going to be better than 10 people doing 50 things. It's so that's the approach I come at it from. And my approach is very much about trying to make it accessible, inviting, maybe even a bit fun, because it's very dull and worthy and earnest a lot of the time, isn't it? It's not very aspirational a lot of the time.
Because you are drawing on people, you're drawing them in by saying, yeah, it's all pretty tricky and we'll all go together on this journey. And I think that's a really nice way of going about it. And as you quite rightly say, we all need to be on board. There will be, organisations, governments, they also need to do their bit. But we can all do bits at different levels. And this is as important as the government and the organisational stuff. And effectively, the more people that are doing it on an individual basis, they're buying into the whole thing. So when the government comes along and says, right, you now can only drive an electric car, everybody's going, okay, well, I get it. I can see why that might be a good thing.
Yeah, and also, these people, or once we get started and we've made a few changes, it doesn't matter how small they are, then we are and we've maybe found our tribe of people, we found some like-minded people, we're a bit more empowered to then email our MP and say, actually, what's going on here with the climate bill, or whatever it might be, or to tweet, I don't know, Coca-Cola and say, what's your plan here with the plastic? And we underestimate how powerful we are, how powerful our voices are, in sort of putting that pressure upwards as well. And there was a study in 2017, I think, that asked MPs why they weren't taking more action on climate. And the vast majority of them said it's because they weren't hearing from their constituents that it was a problem. So, one of the most impactful things we can do is to engage, we don't need to go around bashing everyone over the head with a big stick, but to try and have these conversations, and certainly with our sort of elected representatives, whether that's town, county, national, whatever, like, just to be asking the question. So what, you've declared a climate emergency. So where's your climate action plan? Like, what are we going to do here? And just to kind of keep that pressure on almost.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about just connecting with those that do have perhaps power in different ways. You talk about earlier about compromise. If you live on your own, you get to perhaps do everything,
do what you want.
Exactly. when you live with family, there is compromise there, isn't there, as well as all the other stuff. How have you found that personally, and do you get a lot of people resonating with, well, I want to be really, really green? The rest of my family are.
Yeah, especially, I feel really mean saying this, it will often be the husbands. Do you know, like, because my audience is vastly, overwhelmingly female. And, you know, that's the thing. I feel like for some reason, the people, or the people certainly that I see taking individual actions and taking responsibility for the changes in the home and things, does tend to be the women. And I think that's because traditionally we've been the caregivers and the homemakers and the, you know, and so even, you know, despite how far we've come in terms of equality, we probably are still the ones deciding which loo cleaner to buy and all that kind of dull stuff, aren't we? But therein lies a huge amount of power. But yeah, I mean, my husband is pretty on board. My kids are pretty ambivalent. They're 12 and 10. You know, I was expecting them to be kind of mini Gretas and things, but they're just not really that, which frustrates me slightly. But yeah, you know, we've a huge amount of compromises. So this is like a couple of really stupid examples. Crisps, like I would quite happily not bother with crisps. Not, you know, I like one if there's one there. I knew we couldn't say no crisps. So we get the big bags, the big share bags, and sort of dole them out rather than having lots of individual bags. Everybody's still getting crisps, but it's less plastic. We tried for ages with soap, because that's the thing you're told, like, that's the first change, easiest change to make, soap and shampoo bars. And like, I don't think the kids are washing their hands. Like, my husband was complaining that his skin felt funny, and, you know, my hair felt awful. And so now we buy 5-litre bottles online and, you know, fill them up ourselves. So again, it's not plastic free, it's not zero waste, but it's less plastic. And it's about, you know, these changes need to be sustainable planetary wise, but also sustainable in that you can live with them, you can do them, the family aren't going to hate you, you know, it's not going to cause World War III every day, that kind of, you know, and you're not going to create a rod for your own back where you end up resenting these changes and feel like you're deprived, because no one's going to keep wanting to do that.
Yeah, and it's about choosing battles that are
choose your battles, definitely.
Taking on, because you've all got to live, as you're a family that wants to be together, you've got to live nicely together.
Ideally.
Is there something that you've got, like a bugbear, you're like, oh my goodness, if I see another one of those in my house, or are you pretty much take it in your stride? Okay, we can make that change, we can't make that change.
You know, the kids still want certainly my youngest still wants the sort of plastic tat and things like that, so trying to sort of steer him away from that. My biggest argument, I think, at the moment is trying to persuade the kids to walk or cycle shorter journeys. You know, we've again, this is one of my imperfections. We're a 2-car family, one's electric and one's a hybrid, but I still try and explain to the kids, like, they're still contributing to the traffic that's on the road and the congestion and all that kind of thing, and that actually, you know, if we've got short journeys like into town, or, you know, that actually we should bike or scooter or walk them. Oh my God, you would think I was asking them to go down the mines. You know, it's like, it's really, and sometimes we just need to get out the door and we need to get stuff done, or it's raining or whatever. And sometimes I just can't face it, you know, so that's an ongoing debate, shall we say?
Yes. Ongoing dialogue that you hope at some point will go your way.
I'll keep chipping away.
Absolutely. With children, obviously, and you've written a whole book about green parenting, there's a lot of extra stuff, isn't there? Is it just the same in terms of, have you found managing green parenting as it is for the rest of your life, or are there particular areas where you think, oh, this is a whole new ball game?
I think the difficulty comes when you're pulled in so many different directions, because maybe you've done a bit of research and you think this is the change, or this is what actually I'd really like to do, or we'd really like to do. But then I think, especially as the kids get older as well, they don't want to be the odd one out. You don't want them to be the odd one out. I mean, kids' parties are just a minefield, aren't they? Like, you know, what present do you take? And do you know, I mean, mine are pre-teens at the moment, but I can imagine that only gets harder as they get, you know, at what point are you allowed to stop, or do you stop imposing your own values and ethics and choices on them? And do you let them, you know, and that's part of growing up, isn't it? They've got to be able to come up with their own value system, but if it's not the same as mine, I'm going to be really cross.
Yes, it'll bring a whole new interest to the rebellious side.
Yes,
If
yeah,
either
yeah,
of them
yeah.
do, hopefully neither of them will rebel.
Yes, yeah.
But,
Well, you've been there, haven't you? Yours are grown up now.
yeah,
So
I have to say I was quite lucky. I don't remember them rebelling too much about anything in particular, but maybe I've just blocked that out. But it can go either way, can't it?
yes, yeah.
What do you think is one of the hardest things for people to embrace, or is it just increments? Start with, do you recommend
It
starting
is.
one
It's
thing? Or
just a lot of it is habit change, isn't it? I said, we fall into these habits, and changing habits is hard. Changing, deciding to get a bit fitter is hard. Deciding to give up smoking is hard. Deciding to eat a bit more healthily is hard. So that's a lot of it. And sort of it will be, remembering to take your water bottle with you, or remembering to, I think we're so used to being able to solve an issue by buying something, and actually the best thing or the most sustainable thing often to do is to not buy something, and that feels really weird, doesn't it? So yeah, I think it's about just making a start, maybe picking one area, and just I talk in the Knackered Mums Eco Club all the time with this idea of sort of chunking it down. So maybe you want to look at plastic, because that's a really great slightly tongue-in-cheek gateway drug, because we can see it, can't we? It's very visible, very frustrating, and we can see an impact. So maybe we want to start on plastic, but then we can narrow that down to plastic in the bathroom, and actually I'm going to go shampoo, and actually so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if any of my friends recommend a shampoo bar, or if they don't, what or I'll have a look in the refill shop and see if there's a refill shampoo and all that sort of thing. And so it's just trying to break it down the whole time, so that literally you've got something you can do in like 10 minutes, so that you feel like, oh yeah, no, I'm a step closer. You're not having to make these massive leaps. You're just trying to make it as every hurdle as low as you can, really.
Yeah. And because there are so many places in which you can start,
yeah,
how have you found managing? Maybe you've not experienced eco anxiety. Did you ever think, oh my goodness, this has just all got a little bit, those facts are just now, I wish they'd go away? Does it ever make you think, whew, this is too much? Or because
time.
you're
all the time. Right. And my way of dealing with it is to almost not engage. Like when the latest IPCC report came out, didn't it? Like, I'll admit it, I haven't read it. Like I've read the headline things, but we kind of knew what it was going to say, right? Like we and it doesn't really change anything that I'm doing. So I just, and like we've watched, there was the David Attenborough had a couple of documentaries out last year, didn't he? And they're heart wrenching and they're overwhelming. And I think that, brilliant that this stuff's being broadcast on prime time terrestrial channels and things like that. But they kind of build you up into this sort of ball of anxiety and then just leave you there. And you're like, oh, what do I do with this now? So, I know it's a cliche, and I know it's, but action is the antidote for me to eco anxiety. So, I think we're not very good at talking about it either yet, are we? I think probably lots of us are probably feeling some degree or other of eco anxiety, but it's not like COVID, is it? It's not like, oh God, actually, figures are going up. Are you feeling a bit nervous? I'm feeling a bit anxious about this. Or what do you think about the vaccine? Or what do you, we're not at a stage, although awareness I think is kind of as high as it's ever been. We're not at that stage where they're having those conversations. So, maybe that's part of our role as well, is that we had a whole month in the Knackered Mums Club talking climate, about trying to support each other to be a bit braver, to post that post on social media, or to have that conversation when it came up about X, Y, or Z, because we need to kind of, that brings it into the mainstream consciousness more. And I think it helps people to join those dots between this is happening, this is what I can do about it. Because I think there's a big disconnect between like this is happening and maybe we're sort of crapping ourselves a bit. There's nothing I can do about it. Or, this, but I'm still buying fast fashion and I'm still, flying 3 times a year, and I'm still, actually, hold on a minute, there's some quite easy things you could do that would really, but there does seem to be that disconnect.
Yeah, I wondered about that, because you rightly say the whole COVID, there was a time, and maybe there still is, where you'd be having a conversation with someone and COVID would come up at some point.
Yes, yeah.
But I wonder whether it's just because, even though it appears to me, but maybe it's just my new filter that I spot all this on the news. They obviously can't get away from the fires and the floods that are going around the world, but they are still around the world. They're not actually on our doorstep here yet, even though we're getting, obviously we're getting some changes. We're not getting quite as hideous as maybe some other places are. Not that I'm willing that to happen to wake us all up, but as you say, it's just sharing that.
But I think even when there were these, so there were some flash floods in London, weren't there? And there was all those images of the tube flooding and, cars floating away. I personally didn't feel like there was a particularly strong climate narrative that came with that there wasn't a, this is climate change, guys. This is the reality. We are going to have more of this unless X, Y, or actually, this is probably locked in. If we don't want worse than this, we need to do this. And the mainstream media still, whether they're not brave enough, whether it's not the right people there, I don't know. They still seem to be quite reluctant or deliberately reluctant, I don't know, to make that link
connection. I absolutely agree with that. It's you can share a story and not actually connect all those things, surprisingly. So I'm sort of aware of the time, and I could talk to you all day, but there's a few last points I want to get in. One of them is what's next for you? Have you got other ambitions? Not that you're obviously doing lots and lots of different things.
No, I know what you mean. I've got no idea, and oftentimes my ideas will kind of almost come out of nowhere. Like last year I ran an online festival during lockdown. If you'd asked me a month before, that wouldn't have been on my radar at all, and I wouldn't have meant. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, no, I think I'll do that. And like 2 weeks later, it's happening. So sometimes it will be a bit like that. I would love to write another book, but I need to have a chat with my editor and things like that, and see if there's anything they're up for. But I think my real focus is going to be growing the Knackered Mums Eco Club, because it does feel like it's really impactful, and it's a lovely place to spend time. And the kind of ripples that are coming out of that, the changes that not only the sort of amazing women in there are making, but then the things that they're then kind of going on and doing in their own communities or workplaces and things like that. It's so I think that's going to be I say that at the moment, that's going to be my focus for the next meanwhile.
I love the fact that you are one of these people that just go, oh, that looks interesting, off we go, let's try that.
It's a good and a bad thing. I'm very good at starting stuff, and sometimes not quite so good at finishing it.
Well, you're doing a great job. I have to say, there was an episode not that long ago on your podcast where you had a few people from your eco club on, and that was like being in the room in a club, isn't it?
It's one of my favorite episodes. Nice. Because I think sometimes we feel like we have to be a certain type of person, or we've got to set up a business, or we've got to do so, whereas actually, like, these are just ordinary, I hope they won't mind me saying ordinary, women like you and me and everyone else, and juggling all these balls and spinning all these plates, and yet they're still, and we're all having the same conversations with our partners and, arguments with our kids and that kind of thing, but we're still able to do some stuff. So again, talking about that and being like, you don't need to be Greta or David Attenborough or whatever. Like we can muddle along and make some changes that they honestly add up to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice message. So my two last questions. 2050, that kind of seems to be a date that everybody focuses on. How do you think sustainable living will look by then? Do you think everybody will be engaged by it then? What do you think it might, or you hope?
I swing between absolute despair and, a cautious optimism. And I've just read a book, actually, because we did a whole transport theme last month by the guys, I don't know if you've come across them, who do, there's a fully charged YouTube channel about electric cars and renewables and stuff. And they've got a book out. And I came away feeling quite optimistic having read that. There was all these sort of different things, and this feeling that it was a wave that was really sort of growing quickly, and that was and all these different ideas and all these amazing things that are happening. But then, conversely, sometimes I just sort of look at the government and the way a lot of big businesses behave, and I just think, you know what, we're screwed. But that, I really try and sort of hang on to that optimistic bit. I think 2050, I think the other thing that really puts it in perspective, isn't it, thinking like, how old will my kids be in 2050? 50, that's what, 30 years away, isn't it? I mean, my
Yeah.
kids are going to be like late 30s, early 40s. Like, I can't even imagine that. And I can't even, you know, my son said to me, well, we'll be driving around in hovercars. No. Do you know, like, but I mean, the ideal is that, you know, we've got this great public transport infrastructure, that we've got car-free cities, that we've got, you know, a really great electric car charging infrastructure, that we've got a fossil-free grid and homes, and, you know, that eating, you know, we're all eating much more plant-based, that we've got so much more regenerative agriculture, all these kinds of things. And all this stuff is entirely possible, and is probably entirely possible by much quicker than 2050. At the moment, it feels like there isn't the political will, but that's where we come in to create that
pressure.
Yeah, you know, and that doesn't mean that you have to be like, you know, regardless of what you think of Extinction Rebellion and stuff, they are putting the pressure on, and they are, you know, bringing it into the public consciousness and stuff. But if, you know, that's not your bag, and it's not my bag, and it's not, you know, it's out of a lot of people's comfort zone, but that doesn't mean that you can't write a letter, or, you know, there are things that we can do to sort of put pressure on and to make our voices heard. And you know, politicians follow votes, businesses follow money, politicians follow votes. We can use our money and our voices to push for the change that we want to see.
Yeah, that's very hopeful, isn't it? And helpful, because it allows us all to be doing something useful.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've got to, well, there's a great quote by Greta Thunberg, and it's something like, of course we need hope, but more than hope, we need action. But you know, like the two almost are interlinked, aren't they? If we're hopeless, we won't act, and we won't act. You know, it's that kind of, the more we act, the more hopeful we can be, that kind of thing.
And you've been doing this for nearly a decade now.
I know, that's scary, isn't it?
I wonder, in that time, is there or is there maybe more than one thing where you thought, this has been I'm most proud of doing this feels most useful, or just most enjoyable? Obviously, a number of those things probably drive you to do the next thing. What are those things that make you think, yeah, this is good?
Oh, there are lots of things. I'm so lucky. Like, I loved writing the books. I love seeing people sharing them and commenting and saying, you know, the most, from everything I do, the whole idea is that somebody takes an action as a result of it. It's all very well reading a book or listening to a podcast or coming to, you know, I've started doing quite a few sort of business talks for corporates and things. Well, that's great, but if nothing changes, nothing changes. So, you know, that's I think the best thing, getting those sort of messages, and I read your book and now I'm doing this, or I listened to that episode and now I'm doing this. And so the festival that I mentioned, I mean, that was brilliant last year, like absolutely exhausting, but it was this kind of week of, it was a really weird time because we were in that first lockdown and everything had stopped, and I didn't really know if it was still appropriate to talk about green stuff and things, but actually this coming together of people and the sort of ripples that created was just brilliant. And I adore the Knackered Mums Eco Club, because, you know, every day seeing and hearing about all these changes that people are making, and the support that everyone gives each other and stuff. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that kind of a bit of a pinch me, like, how lucky am I to have all these things that you know, do affirm what I'm doing. That sounds really shallow, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. We all want to be working in a way that you think is useful to someone else.
Yes, yeah. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah.
helps when you get up in the morning and you think, this might be worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
It's been fabulous talking to you, Jen, and hearing some of the ideas and the ways in which we can all do something. And well, I certainly feel quite upbeat. So I'm hoping the other people that listen to it will also feel upbeat too. So thank
you so much for having me.
You are more than welcome. It was so lovely having Jen on the podcast. She absolutely embodies the potential individuals can do to make an environmental difference, and provides a path to sustainable living that is truly accessible to all. I love the ish. It means you can have a go at trying new things and not feel guilty if it isn't perfect. Jen's podcast and books are definitely worth looking at. You can pick up loads of tips on making changes towards a more sustainable life. Links to these can be found in the show notes. I'd like to thank Andy Shaw for audio editing, Jeremy Jones for providing the music, and you for listening. If you want to hear more stories of people doing great things that positively impact our environment, do click on subscribe, and then you'll get instant access to each new episode. I would also be most grateful if you could rate and share the podcast too. Until next time, bye for now.